What if I told you that the basic rule book for how we all live together, how we build cities, make laws, even how we write things down, wasn't figured out in the last century or even the last millennium? It's true. The original blueprint for civilization was sketched out thousands of years ago, along two competing river valleys, one in Mesopotamia and the other in Egypt.
So let's just think about that for a second. How do you build a city from absolute scratch? How do you get thousands of people who've never lived side by side before to cooperate and build something massive? That was the exact problem our ancestors were facing. And the answers they came up with, well, they became the foundation for literally everything that came after.
Okay, so let's back up. For most of human history, we were wanderers, right? Nomads, always on the move. But then, around 8000 BC, something huge happened. We figured out farming. And this Neolithic revolution was a total game changer. For the very first time, we had more food than we needed, which meant we could finally stop roaming and start building. Villages popped up, and by 3000 BC, boom, the world's first real cities begin to rise.
And this wasn't just happening in one place. If you look at this map, you'll see the first great civilizations all shot up along river valleys. You've got the Indus Valley over here, ancient China over there. Rivers were the arteries of civilization. But for today, we're zeroing in on the two that really set the stage for the Western world. Mesopotamia, tucked right here between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and of course Egypt, the gift of the Nile.
Now, if you really want to understand these two cultures, you have to start with the land itself. Their entire destiny, their whole way of thinking, was shaped by the rivers that gave them life. And believe me, those two rivers could not have been more different.
So on one hand, you have Mesopotamia. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers, they were wild, unpredictable. One year you'd get a flood that would wipe out everything. The next, a drought that would starve you. The land was also pancake flat and wide open, which meant they were constantly getting invaded. This created a worldview of anxiety. The feeling that the universe is chaotic and life is just something you have to endure. And then there's Egypt. The Nile was the exact opposite. It flooded gently, on a predictable schedule, every single year, leaving behind rich soil. And to top it off, it was flanked by endless miles of brutal desert, a perfect natural barrier protecting them from the outside world. This created a mindset of stability, of cosmic order, and just optimism.
And just look at this chart. This says it all. The Nile cycle was so reliable, it was like clockwork. The Egyptians based their entire calendar on it. There was a time for the flood, a time for planting, a time for harvesting. This incredible predictability wasn't just good for their crops. It convinced them that the universe was a stable, orderly place, and that the gods were on their side. It shaped everything about them.
Okay, so you have one society built on chaos and another on perfect stability. How does that change the way you rule? How do you create law and order? Well, as you can probably guess, they came up with two very different answers to that question.
In the unpredictable world of Mesopotamia, you couldn't just assume there would be order. You had to create it. You had to impose it. And that led to one of the most important inventions in human history, the written legal code. The most famous one is the Code of Hammurabi. This Babylonian king literally carved 282 laws into a huge stone pillar for everyone to see. It was basically a public contract between the ruler and the ruled.
We've all heard this one, right? An eye for an eye. That's the core idea here, retaliation. It created a clear, if harsh, sense of justice. But, and this is a big but, it wasn't exactly equal justice for all. The punishments were different depending on your social class. A rich man's eye was, in the eyes of the law, worth a lot more than a poor man's eye.
Egypt, on the other hand, took a completely different path. In their stable, predictable world, order wasn't written on a stone tablet. It was embodied in one single person. You can see it right here in this social pyramid. At the very, very top, you have the pharaoh. And he wasn't just a king. Oh no, he was considered a living god walking on earth.
And that is the absolute key difference. The Egyptians believed the pharaoh's divine power was the thing that kept the entire universe in balance. It was his job to make the sun rise, the sky stay blue, and the Nile flood right on schedule. His word was law because his will was the will of the gods. So you've got these two competing ideas, rule by law versus rule by a god-man.
So how did these totally different worldviews affect what they actually created? Let's take a look at their innovations. From the really practical tools that solved everyday problems to achievements so massive they still kind of blow your mind today.
Their writing systems tell the whole story.
On the left, from Mesopotamia, we have cuneiform. This is the world's first writing system, and it's super practical. Just wedge-shaped marks pressed into wet clay. What was it for? Mostly accounting, keeping track of grain shipments and taxes. Then, on the right, you have Egyptian hieroglyphics, these beautiful, intricate symbols that were both pictures and sounds, usually carved into sacred tombs and temples. One is about function, the other's monumental art. But here's the thing. Cuneiform, as important as it was incredibly complicated. You had to train for years to become a scribe. The next huge leap actually came from the Phoenicians. They were master traders who sailed all over the place, and they needed a faster, simpler way to do business. So they brilliantly took the idea of writing and boiled it down to just 22 simple letters, where each one represented a sound. That idea, the alphabet, was an absolute revolution.
So why was it such a big deal? Well, think of it like the ancient world's first open-source code. It was simple enough that almost anyone could learn it, not just a handful of highly trained scribes. So as Phoenician merchants sailed the Mediterranean, they spread this alphabet everywhere, and it just took off. It changed the world. It is the direct ancestor of the letters we are using right this very second.
And Mesopotamia's practical genius didn't stop there. I mean, these are the people who gave us the wheel, the sail, and the plow. These are inventions that solved the most basic problems of moving stuff, trading, and growing food. They even figured out how to make bronze, which kicked off, well, the Bronze Age. These weren't luxuries. This was the essential toolkit for building a society from the ground up.
Egypt's genius, on the other hand, was expressed on a completely different scale. It was monumental. They didn't just build things, they built for eternity. I mean, just to construct the pyramids, they had to make these incredible leaps forward in engineering, geometry, and astronomy. All of that knowledge, all of that national effort was pointed towards one single, massive goal: making sure their god-king would live forever.
So, after all these thousands of years, what does any of this mean for us? Why does it matter? It matters because we are still living inside the house they built. Their blueprint is still, in so many ways, our blueprint.
Seriously, just think about it. The idea that we should have written laws that apply to everybody, that's from Mesopotamia. The 365-day calendar we plan our entire lives around, that's from Egypt. The alphabet you're reading right now, a direct descendant of Mesopotamian ideas refined by the Phoenicians. The principles of geometry and engineering that build our skyscrapers, Egypt. The wheel and the sail that power global commerce, Mesopotamia. We inherited our world from both of them.
They laid down the rules, they invented the tools, and they asked the first huge questions about order and justice. And their answers were so powerful, so fundamental, that we're still using them today. So the next time you look at a calendar or read a sentence, just remember those two river valleys where it all got started. The real question isn't just what we've inherited, but which parts of their ancient blueprint are we still building on, and which parts might we need to rewrite?